Well, as I said earlier, we're continuing our series through the book of Micah today. And before we continue, I just want to give one more thanks. Can we give one more round of applause for all of our choir who came up here? Thank you all for blessing us with your voices. Thanks for coming in early today. I'll make a plug at the end of service, but this is something we're going to continue to do through Advent. And so next Sunday, if you want to join in, we'll take everybody. It's awesome. You get to practice, so it's not you're not up here cold turkey in front of everyone. But just come at 9 a.m. next Sunday. You can hop right in. We'd love to include you in this. And thank you for those who came for this first one. It was just absolute blessing. What a beautiful song. This picture of Jesus as this precious rose that Isaiah and all these foretold, but now has come to bear into our life. And so, as we continue the series in Advent, we're reflecting on that rose of Jesus, who was foretold his first coming, the first Advent of Christmas. Advent means to appear. And now we remember in the season of Advent that Jesus is coming back again. And as we started talking about last week, Advent is typically considered a season of waiting. It is a time when we remember that we are in a period of waiting. We're waiting for things to come. We're waiting for things to happen. We're especially waiting for Jesus to come back. And waiting is hard. It's something that does not come naturally. Anyone who's been around a child knows that you're not born with the ability to wait. It's something you have to be trained. It's something that you go through and you slowly get better and better at. And the season of Advent is a reminder that we are in this period where there's a lot wrong. There's a lot good too, but there's a lot wrong that's going to be fixed at the end. And we're reflecting, what do we do while we wait? Because what Jesus does not want us to do is to just kick back with our feet up 24/7 and say, all right, he's coming. It's going to be good. One of the temptations is if you think like Jesus is coming, we believe Jesus could come back any minute. He could interrupt the sermon. Some of you are like, please do it. Like that would be awesome. But he could come back any minute now. But the temptation would be to just think like, all right, well, if that's the case, then I'm just going to sit around and wait for it. And yet we have been given things to do while we wait. But it is in the waiting and the anticipation for what's coming that enables us to do now what we should be doing. And so we're going to be looking more at the prophet Micah. And just a refresher, or for those who weren't here last week, Micah is this prophet in the Old Testament. God's people are in the southern kingdom of Judah, or comes to be known as Judea. And things are not good. Last week we looked at, Micah uses the language from God that the leaders and the religious leaders are eating the flesh of the poor. That's how they're abusing those in their community. They're neglecting them. They're not taking care of them. And so there's not good things happening, lots of issues. And so Micah is speaking a word of judgment. But today we're looking at a word of hope. But the problem is the word of hope for the people comes after a period of trial and struggle. They're going to get their just desserts for what they've done, and yet at the end of it, there's hope. And so with this message we're going to be looking at today is we look at this great story that God has laid out for us. The story that begins when God created the world and ends when he returns and restores it all, is that we have something worth waiting for in the midst of struggles. Now, some of us, our lives are going well right now, and praise be God for that. For some of us, we, on a daily basis or on a regular occurrence, feel the struggles of pain, whether that's physical or emotional. We feel like we're waiting for happiness in times of deep sadness or mourning. We feel like we're waiting for the right person. We're waiting for things to get better, waiting for an opportunity. We do a lot of waiting in the midst of really bad situations, right? It's easy to wait when things are good. Like, if you're waiting on a beach, you're like, oh, this is great. But when you're waiting in pain, when you're waiting in suffering, it's a lot harder. When you're in the middle of the night and there's no indication of a sunrise, you wonder how long until that sun comes up again. And this word that Micah has today is a promise that sun is coming up. And even if you can't see it right now, even when it feels really dark, it's always darkest before the dawn. And so we're going to be looking at Micah 4 and Micah 7 as this promise that there is a sunrise, that there is something good coming. First for God's people, Israel or Judah, but then also for us. And so we're starting here in Micah chapter 4, starting in verse 6. This is the day that God is promising when all things will be good, all things will be made right. So Micah 4. In that day, declares the Lord, I will assemble the lame and gather those who have been driven away and those whom I have afflicted. And the lame I will make the remnant, and those who are cast off a strong nation. And the Lord will reign over them in Mount Zion, for this time forth and forevermore. He starts off by saying, in that day of restoration, that day of rescue, I'm going to assemble all of those who are stricken, who are afflicted, right? Who are lame, who are dealing with some sort of ailment, right? And I'm going to make them this remnant. And so I'm going to make them this remaining crew, this remaining starting this new nation, starting from just a little remnant that's going to grow. And those who are cast off, those who are pushed aside, those who feel so far off are going to be this strong nation who the Lord is going to reign over in Mount Zion. Right? Now, Mount Zion is another term for Jerusalem, and we take this, first off, God's people, we're going to be restored to Jerusalem, but we know that in the last day he's going to restore, and it's going to be the new Jerusalem, the people of God, the city of God, and so he's going to be the one reigning over, not just for a time, right? Earthly rulers come and go, but from this time forth and forever. So all who feel afflicted, who feel lame, who feel broken, I'm going to gather them in Christ. God will rule over, and it'll be an eternal kingdom. He continues in verse 8, "And you, O tower of the flock, hill of the daughter of Zion, to you shall it come. The former dominion shall come, kingship for the daughter of Jerusalem." And so again, there's this restoration of this nation, of this people, right? This tower of the flock, so the flock being the sheep of God, God's people. The hill of the daughter of Zion, again, it's referring to this place where God's people will be gathered, referred to as Zion, daughter of Zion. There will be kingship for this kingship of God himself. He continues and says, "Now why do you cry aloud? Is there no king in you? Has your counselor perished, that pain seized you like a woman in labor?" So he starts by saying, hey, there's this promise, this is a good restoration, this is great, but why do you cry out right now, right? I'm promising you God's going to be your king, he's going to rule. Right now, it's because there is no king, right? It's because things are not good, because there's people perishing. Your counselor, your rulers have perished, right? And then he compares it to the pain seized like a woman in labor. He's going to continue this picture. He says, "Writhe and groan, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in labor. For now you shall go out from the city and dwell in the open country. You shall go to Babylon. There you shall be rescued. There the Lord will redeem you from the hand of your enemies." And so he compares the struggles that God's people are going through and the pain that they're going to endure as labor, a woman in labor. Now, as many of you know, we just had a child, and my wife Melanie got to go in labor, and so I thought to drive this home I'd include some pictures of what labor actually looks like. Just kidding. It was a joke. Gave a couple people a heart attack. Like, don't want to see that. No, in actuality, if you've seen the movies, if you've been there, if you've experienced it yourself, labor is not fun. I don't think anyone dreams about the experience of labor. Nobody says, "That's great, I love that." Like, forget about the baby part, like, I just want labor. I just want to be in intense discomfort and pain for a long time, not sure when it's going to end. But on the other side of labor, one of the most beautiful things. And all of a sudden, all of the pain and the suffering is a bit of an afterthought for the joy and the gift that is in your hands. And so what Micah is saying to God's people, and again, he's talking about specifically what they're going to go through, but this applies to all of God's people. The present sufferings are labor. Paul talks this way when he talks about all of creation groaning and all of the issues in this world as labor pains. Right? That right now there is pain, but ultimately it's leading towards this redemption, this rescue, this good thing. And again, I mentioned this last week. This is where Paul can compare whatever you're going through as a light momentary affliction compared to the glory that is to come. And so for Micah, speaking to these people, he tells them, you're going to go to Babylon. Now what this means, and again, sometimes we have a tough time imagining what exile looks like. It's actually very fitting. We were praying for those from Venezuela, and I can't imagine what it's like to just leave my home that I've known my entire life and just to a new land with a different primary language and just hope that things are good there. Right? I'm very grateful that I have always felt comfortable wherever I've gone, but for the people of God here in Micah's day, what they're being told is, you know your house? Well, somebody's going to come and they're going to walk you out of your house and lead you to a foreign land, and you will probably never get back. Maybe your kids will. There's a promise of redemption, of restoration. But for you, right, your home is gone. Different people are going to rule over you. with a different language, different customs, different culture, and you're going to be foreigners, exiled in a foreign land. And you think of what all God's people went through in slavery in Egypt, through the wilderness, and they get to this promised land, and then they turn their backs on God, and this is the punishment for it, is that you're going to walk to a foreign land, you're going to be led. I mean, again, just imagine going on foot, too. Just days and days, weeks and weeks being walked somewhere, never sure if you'll ever get to go back to the house you lived in. And so Micah is acknowledging this is painful, right? Micah's not saying, hey, you know what you're going through? Don't worry about it. It's fine. Like, it's not a big deal because good things are coming. He says, no, this is like labor. This is painful. This hurts. And you don't know exactly when it's going to end. And yet the promise is you're going to go out from the city and dwell in the open country, and you're going to go to Babylon, but it's from there you shall be rescued. There the Lord will redeem you from the hand of your enemies. And so there's this painful part, this painful journey, but over there, it is from that place, that pain, that sorrow, that questioning, that God's going to lead you back, and he's going to restore all things. He's going to rescue you from the hands of your enemies. And so for us as Christians, we know that ultimately that return, we are exiles in this land. In a way, we are home here on earth, and yet our true home is established when Jesus returns, and so we are exiles. And so in this lifetime, we experience a lot of pain. We always feel this disconnect. I don't quite belong here. I don't know if you feel this way as a Christian sometimes, like, man, I just feel a little off from some people. I can't always joke the same way. I can't always talk the same way. People look at me weird. Maybe, maybe not. But as Christians, our allegiance is to a different kingdom, and so we are exiled here. And the promise is we're going to return. There's going to be this promised land, and in the meantime, what we're going through is labor pains. The sadness, the suffering, the mourning, it's real, and it hurts. But it's through this labor, it's through this pain, that a new thing is born. A new creation, a new world, new joy, new hope. And here's the good news for us as Christians is that it's actually already come for us. Because when Jesus came on his first advent, he didn't say, hey, just so you know, the kingdom will come at some point. So the kingdom's at hand. It's here. Jesus' reign has begun. And so this hope that Jesus has, this restoration has already started in us when we become part of God's people, when we believe in Jesus, when we are baptized into his name. It is yours. Take this promise. And so even while we're living as exiles in the discomforts of this world, we've already been given a foretaste, a deposit, a first little preview of the return that's to come. And so we get to have that perspective as we go about our life, that what I'm going through is real, the sufferings, the pain, and if you're in a good spot right now, like I said, praise be to God. But Micah's words are not just for, hey, if you're going through something right now, this is for in our lifetime, we're going to go through things. This world's filled with pain and suffering, and yet at some point, at many points, we need to be reminded this is temporary. As long as it feels. I don't know when the sun's rising, but it's going to rise. And then we'll look back and say, wow, do you remember what we went through? But it's through the suffering that comes the new birth. And so now we're going to jump ahead to Micah 7, where Micah is looking around at a world where he feels like it's very messed up. And his attitude towards it, building off of this promise, what is Micah's attitude towards this fallen world? And so Micah 7, starting in verse 1, he says this, woe is me, for I have become as when the summer fruit has been gathered, as when the grapes have been gleaned. There is no cluster to eat, no first ripe fig that my soul desires. All right, I don't know if you've said woe is me lately. It's a pretty rough spot to be in. And again, remember Micah, he's this prophet for God. God has said, hey Micah, tapped him on the shoulder, you're going to speak for me. And Micah's going to a world that's like, man, nobody listens to me. Apparently I'm speaking for God, but they're rejecting me. They're not doing anything about this. And so he feels like he's kind of like Elijah at one point. Says, hey, God, I'm the only faithful one left. Like everyone else has turned from you. And so Micah's saying, man, I'm suffering out here. I've become when the summer fruit has been gathered, as when the grapes have been gleaned. And so everything good has been stripped away, right? So a tree is good for its fruit. Well, what happens when all the fruit's gone? There's no more fruit. It feels barren. It feels taken, emptied. There's no cluster to eat, no first ripe fig that my soul desires. So his soul is desiring this thing that is gone. He can't find it. Here, the godly has perished from the earth, and there is no one upright among mankind. They all lie in wait for blood, and each hunts the other with a net. This just, he's a bit of a pessimist, but But again, he's speaking for God. He's looking around and he says, man, it feels like all the godly people are gone. I look around and everyone feels so selfish. Everyone seems so greedy. Like, God said he made this world good, but I'm looking around and it feels so fallen and so broken, and everyone just seems like they're out to take advantage of one another, right? They're just hunting one another with a net. That's just this image, just like they're hatching these plans and taking advantage of one another. He continues to describe just kind of the broken state of the world he's living. He says their hands are on what is evil. So they're doing evil things to do it well. The prince and the judge ask for a bribe, and the great man utters the evil desire of his soul. Thus they weave it together. And so here he's, again, we talked about this last week, but he's talking about those that are entrusted to carry out justice in this world. Instead, they are asking for bribes. They're giving out justice at a cost, right? And then even the great men, these are great men, these have power, they're uttering these evil desires of their soul, right? These lustful, greedy, wrong things. He continues on, he says, the best of them is like a briar. That's like a thorny hedge. Like the best one is just like this nuisance of a painful hedge that does nothing but inflict scratches and pain. The most upright of them, a thorn hedge. The day of your watchmen, of your punishment has come. Now their confusion is at hand. So again, the best and the most upright people Micah can find, even there, nothing more than just a thorny hedge, right? Just in the way, causing pain. None of them have any worth, right? And so he's telling them now, all right, the day of your punishment is come. Continues in verse 5, he says, put no trust in a neighbor. Have no confidence in a friend. Guard the doors of your mouth from her who lies in your arms. Here he's talking about just the lack of trust, right? When you can't trust people, and again, times always change. You think of how great would it be if everyone could just leave their door wide open all the time and never have to worry? I don't know if you're like this, where you're lying in bed and all of a sudden you're like, did I lock the back door? If I didn't, somebody's definitely going to break in and steal everything. And so then you get up in the middle of the night and it's already locked, but you just checked anyways, right? Mike is saying that in this state that he's in, he's looking around this world of people just hurting one another. He says, nobody can even trust their next door neighbor, right? Nobody can trust anyone. You can't even put confidence in your friend, right? Don't trust them. They might take advantage of you. They might stab you in the back. Guard the doors of your mouth from her who lies in your arms. So again, he's zoning in, right? So your neighbor, don't trust them. Your friend, have no confidence in them. Now the woman in your arms, right? Your spouse, your fiance, your loved one, your family member, the one that you would hold so close, you have to watch what you say even around them, because you don't know if you can trust them. This is the world he's looking around and seeing. For the son treats the father with contempt. The daughter rises up against her mother. The daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own house. He's not talking about Thanksgiving. That was a bad joke. I don't know if you guys saw the Thanksgiving memes about family disputes. I'm grateful that our Thanksgivings always go really well. But again, he's zooming in here. Your very close family, not even that can you trust. And so he's living in this world where it feels like nobody is godly, nobody's righteous, everyone's just out to get one another. You can't trust anyone. And so now Micah is going to say, here's what I do in the midst of all of that. And I'll come back to this verse later, but I encourage you, this is something that I have worked into prayers before. This is something that a verse that I look at for comfort. This is Micah 7:7. So in the midst of all this distrust, this brokenness, this unrighteousness, Micah says, but as for me, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. So notice first he says what he's going to do in contrast, and then he says why he can do that. So first, in the midst of all of this, when you can't trust the person next to you, I'm going to look to the Lord, right? And I'm going to wait for the God of my salvation. I'm going to be content to wait whatever might happen, and it's in the confidence, my God will hear me, right? Again, when we prayed earlier, this is not just us throwing wishes into the universe. This is different than what some call manifesting. Like if you just speak it, you can curve the universe to your desires. This is talking to a real being, a real God who loves and listens, who says he hears us. You look at the story of the people of Israel, and one of the things that always stands out to me is when they're in slavery, when God is going to rescue them from slavery and their oppression, he says, I have heard the cries of my people. That when they cried out in injustice and looking around like, look at what's happening to us, it didn't go unnoticed. God said, I heard those cries, and he did something about it. And so Micah here, in almost a bit of a paraphrase of Joshua, so when the people of God go into the promised land the first time, Joshua gives this speech, all right, you're all settled. God has given you this amazing gift. Don't go and worship all the false gods. Don't do like all the other people are doing, right? Be true to God, because you're going to be tempted to chase after all these other things. And then he says, but as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. And so there's kind of a paraphrase here and some resonance here where Micah is saying, in the midst of whatever you might be tempted to do, as for me, I'm going to look to God. I'm going to look to the Lord. I'm going to wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. This confidence. My God's going to hear me. So I can wait through whatever might endure, right? I'm going to look to him. And so then he turns to those who are after him. He says, rejoice not over me, O my enemy. When I fall, I shall rise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord will be a light to me. I will bear the indignation of the Lord because I have sinned against him, until he pleads my case and executes judgment for me. He will bring me out to the light. I shall look upon his vindication. So there's this beautiful movement here. He says, for all of those who might scoff at him, he says, you can try and gloat, but don't rejoice, because when I fall, in God I'm going to rise. And when I sit in darkness, the Lord will be a light to me. I will bear the indignation of the Lord, right? I can take all the punishment that I deserve, because ultimately he's going to plead my cause and execute judgment for me on my behalf, good judgment, and he will bring me out to the light. I shall look upon his vindication. And I think about this light picture that Micah is pulling on, and Micah overlapped with the prophet Isaiah, and I just think about it in Isaiah 9. There's this prophecy that those who have been walking in a great darkness, or in darkness, have seen a great light, right? For unto us a son is born. And so this light that is coming, right, in the midst of this darkness, in the midst of the middle of the night, whatever suffering or pain we might be enduring, in the coming of Jesus, there is this great light. And it's amazing because you think about it, the darker it is, the easier it is to see the light, right? When all the flashing things, beautiful lights, I love them, the brighter it is, the lights get drowned out. But it's when it's darkest that sometimes it's the easiest to see that little glow. And it's not just little glow. Like I said, Isaiah and Matthew will pick up on this language in Jesus' ministry, have seen a great light, an uncomparable light. In Revelation, when Jesus returns, this picture of God is just this multicolored, beautiful light shining upon everything. You can't escape it. There's no need for a sun or a moon anymore because God is its light. And this light came into the world to go to people who are walking in great darkness, to go to people who are looking around in all the brokenness and saying, man, this world is messed up. What do? I feel abused. I feel broken. I feel like I can't get my stuff together. And it's that light that came in and spoke words of hope, that gathered the lame. Think of how many times Jesus came to people who couldn't use their legs, right, who couldn't walk, who couldn't see, who couldn't hear. He brought healing, brought rescue from their current state. And you think of Micah's day, right? Micah is sitting here feeling like there's no one left, right? It's just me. I feel broken. I feel helpless. And I wonder exactly what that would look like to look at everybody out there and to say, I am all alone, right? There's no godly person left. And I wonder if it would sound something like, my God, why have you forsaken me? Because Jesus, who was the light, came, and he got to the point where even his closest followers either betrayed him or deserted him. Right? Couldn't trust anyone. He came, and the people who came to execute justice abused the system, worked it against him to get him executed like a criminal on a cross for crimes he never did. And Jesus on that cross was left even by his own Father in a great darkness. And yet, like Micah, who says in the midst of all of this, I will look to the Lord, I will wait for the God of my salvation. Jesus, after he's been forsaken by his own Father, what does he say to him? Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. I am deserted, I am left, and yet, God, I give you everything. And he did that so that you and I might have a hope that when we're going through the mess that is this world, this is not everything there is. Because Jesus the light was extinguished and buried in a tomb, sealed over so not even a crack of light could come out of it. And then on Easter morning, as they came to mourn what seemed to be the worst day ever, it became the best day. And as the sun rose, light broke forth, the tomb was rolled away, and hope was once again restored. First to Mary of Magdalene, to the other disciples, and then to eventually the whole world. And this light has continued to proclaim throughout the world in the name of Jesus. So all who hear it might know that as you walk in darkness, there is a great light. That when it feels like you fall in Christ, you will rise again. When it feels like there is injustice towards you, God will judge on behalf of you. He will declare you righteous and restore all things. And you will be rescued from whatever circumstances might happen. And so as we think about this Advent, we are looking forward to Christmas when Jesus came. We're looking forward to when Jesus comes again and all things are right. And we're thinking about how, as we wait, can we be a witness to the world about this light, this hope, right, when it feels like everything's messed up? How can we remind ourselves, how can we look to the Lord in the midst of this waiting, right? This verse 7 here, I encourage you, just take this, make this a prayer. But as for me, I will look to the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. With Advent officially kicking off today, I just encourage you to remember this season, that Jesus is the light who gathers the whole world, all of the broken, the bruised, the far off, the sad, the depressed. It says, come to me to find rest and hope and light. And as the days get darker, look to this light for hope and restoration. Now, what I invite you to do in this season is, in the church calendar, as we go through the year, there are periods where we set aside to do a little something more, right? That's the beautiful thing about holidays, just in life, is we have regular, like, August is just kind of a normal month, right? You're just doing it, and that's good. If every day was a holiday, all the holidays would kind of lose their meaning. It's holidays that give, it's kind of the special seasons that give the ordinary seasons their meaning, and kind of the ordinary seasons that give holidays their meaning. It's kind of this beautiful back and forth. And for Christians, the season of Advent, preparing for Christmas, is one of those special seasons where we do a little extra. We think about how we can grow in our understanding, our faith, our trust in God, and love towards others. Last week we talked about loving mercy and doing justice. So I encourage you, with Advent kicking off today, for 3 weeks leading up to Christmas, are there things you can do to bring justice, to bring mercy to those around you? But today what I'd like you to think about is, how can we be a people that set patterns and set rhythms where we are looking to the Lord and reminding ourselves that we are waiting for the God of our salvation? If you do, here's an example. I invite you to maybe grab like a devotional, and if you need help finding something, let me know. For you, your family, whatever. You can just read Micah, read one chapter of Micah every day. You'll get through Micah 3 times for Christmas Eve. Imagine how much more saturated you are with the promises of God's restoration and his concern for you, reading that every day. Maybe this season of Advent, you can set aside a special set of prayer. Again, a lot of us, we pray before meals, maybe before bedtime. Is there a way that you can build into your rhythm, maybe this season, a dedicated time of prayer? And write down, make a list. Here are people who need my prayers that I'm going to lift up every day from now until Christmas. Right? I'm going to go to God with these things because he is also the God of their salvation. And I'm asking him to bring restoration and hope and rescue. Confident that in all these prayers, God will hear us. And again, we can't do everything. If you try and pick up 12 new habits every day from here until Christmas, I guarantee it's not going to work. But I invite you, and maybe as the rest of service, maybe on your way home, maybe today while you're eating lunch, what's one thing you as a person, as a household can do this Advent to set your eyes on the Lord of light, the one who brings us up when we fall? Because I promise you, you're going to endure things, whether this Advent Christmas season, whether it's another time. And so as Christians, we always want to be looking up to God and then out to our neighbor. So what's something you can pick up and to embody this? And what's remarkable, and we can join together in Christmas and rejoice in that light of the world who has come, and talk about the ways that God is, in his word and his love and his prayers, hearing us, has continued to bring upon his love to us. And then as we go forth this season and outward, bring that love to a world that desperately needs it, a world that is desperately dark and in need of hope. So I encourage you to reflect on that, talk about it as a household, talk about it, reflect on yourself, journal, commit to something. And again, if you need help, I don't know if you noticed, there's a phone number down there. You can always text questions. If you're reading through Micah once a day and you're like, man, this stuff's weird, let me know, and happy to help you. But as we embody this season of waiting, it's a season of waiting with anticipation, a season of waiting and looking to God, a season of waiting and loving our neighbor. I encourage you to think about how we can do that as people, as households, and as a church. And as we do that, we await and proclaim and witness to the world, Jesus is coming back, and all that is wrong will be rescued. In Jesus' name, amen.